Overconfidence Effect. The overconfidence effect is a tendency to exhibit unwarranted certainty in one's responses to questions. For instance, individuals often rate their answers as 99% certain, yet these responses are incorrect around 40% of the time for certain types of questions. Gambler's Fallacy. The gambler's fallacy occurs when individuals believe that past events influence future probabilities, mistakenly thinking that previous outcomes affect the likelihood of subsequent events. However, in reality, each event is independent, and past occurrences do not alter future probabilities. This fallacy often leads people to expect certain outcomes based on patterns or streaks, even though the underlying probabilities remain unchanged. Omission Bias. Omission bias is a tendency to view harmful actions as worse than equally harmful inactions. It influences judgments by emphasizing the perceived moral or ethical distinction between acts of commission and acts of omission. Proportionality Bias. Proportionality bias is the inclination to perceive a correlation between the severity of an action and the magnitude of its consequences, often leading to judgments based on the perceived proportionality of the action to its outcome. This bias can affect decision-making by influencing individuals to assign greater importance or culpability to actions they perceive as directly proportional to their consequences. Moral Credential Effect. It is a psychological phenomenon where individuals who have previously demonstrated their moral character or performed a virtuous act feel licensed to engage in less moral behavior later on. In essence, they believe that their past good deeds give them moral credentials or permission to act in a less ethical manner in the future. Self-serving bias. It is the inclination to attribute greater responsibility to oneself for successes compared to failures, a cognitive bias known as a self-serving bias. This bias often leads individuals to take credit for positive outcomes while assigning external factors or luck to negative ones. Framing Effect. The framing effect refers to the tendency to reach different conclusions from identical information depending on how it's presented. Actor-observer bias. It is a tendency to overemphasize personality factors and underestimate situational influences when explaining other people's behaviors, while doing the opposite when explaining our own behaviors. This phenomenon is known as the fundamental attribution error. Picture Superiority Effect. The idea that concepts learned through visual images are more readily and frequently remembered compared to concepts learned through written words. Bias blind spot. The bias blind spot refers to the phenomenon where individuals tend to recognize cognitive biases in others but fail to see those same biases in themselves. Essentially, people may acknowledge that biases exist and influence others' judgments and decisions, but they often underestimate or overlook the extent to which they themselves are influenced by biases. Outcome bias. It is the inclination to evaluate a decision based on its eventual outcome rather than the quality of the decision-making process at the time it was made. Mere exposure effect. It is a psychological phenomenon where individuals tend to form preferences or aversions to things simply because they are familiar with them. Hard easy effect. It is the inclination to overestimate one's capability to tackle difficult tasks while underestimating one's ability to handle easy tasks. Survivorship bias. Survivorship bias occurs when attention is focused on individuals or entities that have successfully completed the process, while inadvertently neglecting those that did not due to their lack of visibility. Baader-Meinhof Phenomenon. The Baader-Meinhof Phenomenon, also known as a frequency illusion, is the perception that something recently noticed suddenly appears with high frequency shortly afterward. In reality, before we directed our attention to it, we simply overlooked it. Availability heuristics. The availability heuristic is the inclination to overestimate the probability of events that readily come to mind. The accessibility of memories can be influenced by their recency, unusualness, or emotional intensity. Dunning-Kruger Effect. It is the inclination for inexperienced individuals to overrate their own competence, while experts tend to underestimate theirs. Halo Effect. It is a tendency for people's positive or negative qualities to influence how they are perceived across different aspects of their personality. Pygmalion Effect, the phenomenon where the expectations others have of a person influence that person's behavior, leading to a self-fulfilling prophecy. Decoy Effect. This bias is commonly leveraged in marketing. It refers to the phenomenon where consumers tend to alter their preference between two options when a third option, asymmetrically dominated, is introduced. An option is asymmetrically dominated when it is inferior to one option in all aspects but is comparatively superior in some respects and inferior in others to the other option. Selection bias. Selection bias occurs when individuals, groups, or data are chosen for analysis in a manner that lacks proper randomization. This failure to achieve randomization results in a sample that does not accurately represent the intended population. Anchoring bias. The anchoring bias refers to the tendency to excessively depend on a single characteristic or piece of information when making decisions, typically the first piece of information acquired on a subject. This is why initial impressions hold significant weight. They establish a framework of perception that becomes difficult to alter. This bias is frequently manipulated in negotiations, where a seller may propose an initially high price, which then serves as a starting point for bargaining, causing the buyer to insufficiently deviate from it. Confirmation bias. Confirmation bias is the inclination to seek, interpret, prioritize, and recall information in a manner that aligns with one's existing beliefs or expectations. Egocentric bias. Egocentric bias involves placing excessive trust in one's own viewpoint or having a more favorable opinion of oneself than is warranted by reality. Examples of this include the false consensus effect, where individuals overestimate the extent to which others share their views, and the false uniqueness bias, where people perceive their own projects and personal attributes as more distinctive than they truly are. Hindsight bias. The hindsight bias, also known as the "I knew it all along" effect, is a widespread tendency for individuals to view past events as being more predictable than they truly were. Projection bias. It is their inclination to overestimate the extent to which one's future selves will align with their current preferences, thoughts, and values, resulting in less than ideal decisions. Apophenia. Apophenia refers to the inclination to perceive meaningful connections or patterns between unrelated things. This bias can contribute to stereotypes by leading individuals to expect certain groups and traits to coincide, thereby overestimating how frequently these correlations occur. Another manifestation of apophenia is pareidolia, where individuals perceive familiar images such as animals in random stimuli like cloud. Serial position effect. The serial position effect refers to the tendency for individuals to remember the initial and final items in a list more accurately than those in the middle. Recency bias. Recency bias assigns greater significance to the most recent event or information, as seen in cases such as an interviewer who vividly recalls only the last person they interviewed because it's the most recent conversation they had. This bias is connected to the serial position effect. Authority bias. Authority bias is the inclination to assign higher credibility to the opinion of an authority figure, regardless of the content of the opinion. Unit bias. Unit bias refers to adhering to suggested standard quantities such as food serving sizes perceived as appropriate, leading individuals to consume all of it even if it exceeds their personal needs. Availability cascade. It is a self-perpetuating cycle where a shared belief becomes increasingly credible as it is repeated more frequently in public discussions. This phenomenon can be encapsulated by the saying, "Repeat something often enough and it will become true." It is closely linked to the availability heuristic. Bandwagon effect. It is the inclination to engage in certain actions because they are commonly practiced by others. This phenomenon occurs for two primary reasons: conformism, where individuals seek to align with the behavior of others to fit in, and a lack of information, where individuals perceive the opinions of many people as likely to be more accurate than their own. Illusory truth effect. Individuals tend to perceive statements as true if they have heard them before, even if they cannot consciously recall hearing them. Next in line effect. When individuals take turns speaking in a group, following a predetermined order such as going clockwise around a room, they often experience reduced recall for the words spoken by the person immediately preceding them. Ingroup bias. Ingroup bias is a tendency for individuals to favorably treat others whom they perceive as members of their own groups. This bias typically arises because we have more frequent interactions with individuals within our group compared to strangers. As a result, people within our group appear unique, while those outside our group seem unremarkable and conformist. The mere exposure effect also contributes to this bias. Spotlight effect. It is a feeling of being constantly under scrutiny stemming from an exaggerated belief in how much others pay attention to our appearance or behavior. Choice supportive bias. The choice supportive bias is the inclination to recall our choices as superior to what they truly were. This bias arises from our tendency to attribute more positive characteristics to the options we selected while ascribing negative traits to those we did not choose. Ostrich Effect. Individuals often avoid confronting potentially negative but valuable information to sidestep psychological discomfort, metaphorically described as burying their heads in the sand. Selective perception bias. It is the inclination to overlook and promptly forget stimuli that provoke emotional discomfort and challenge our pre-existing beliefs. Peak and rule. People tend to perceive not the total of an experience, but rather the average of its peak moments and how it concluded. Information bias. Information bias is a cognitive tendency to pursue information even when it does not impact decision-making or action.